There are a ton of archetypes in Metaphor Refantazio, and despite the game being about equality, not all archetypes in this game were created equal, and you all know what that means. It's time for the tier list video. In all fairness, most archetypes have at least some redeeming qualities to them, but there are some that I just cannot be a fan of no matter how hard I try. You can definitely make arguments for some of them, so if you disagree with me, feel free to drop a comment saying how stupid I am. Before we go into the list itself, we of course got to set the criteria for how I'm going to be ranking everything. So instead of ranking every single rank of archetypes separately, I'm going to be ranking the entire lineages together. This not only makes it a lot less annoying, but it also makes it more fair for some archetypes that might be good in the early game and lesser in the late game, and vice versa. Unlike my other tier lists, I won't be doing resource management or synergy rankings or what have you because it's kind of redundant for this game and how it's designed. Anyone can equip anything, so you can realistically make anything work. This is honestly one of the harder tier lists to make because of that, but I'm going to do my best. With that all laid out on the table, let's head into what I personally consider to be the worst archetype lineage in the game. I don't know how big of a hot take this is or is not, but I think Gunner is just pure dog shit. Like, I understand what they're going for, you know, you're a gunner, you want to be in the back lines, I get it. But if I want to use someone and be in the back lines, I'd just use any of the magic builds that are better. Being in the back lines is the entire thing that makes magic good. And sure, it's nice to have some fizz skills that make use of this, but it's almost always unneeded. There is one boss fight in this entire game I can recall it being useful for, and that's about it. It's very rare you run into a scenario where you'd need backline fizz skills over backline magic. And you might be quick to say, Jan, the third tier of Gunner uses magic skills. I mean, that fixes the issue, right? No, it doesn't. It makes it worse, actually. If the entire pro of Gunner is that it's meant to be using backline fizz skills, why in the hell would I want magic skills on this archetype? Dragoon makes me so mad, because if they just double down, or no, even triple down because it's the third tier, and just made it more fizz, it could have been insane, because the second tier had okay skills, but then they just said, you know what, fuck it, let's defeat the entire purpose of using Gunner and make it magic based. It makes absolutely no sense, dude. If I want magic, I'll use a magic class. Also, take a look at the stat spread, okay? What does that say? It adds more strength and luck than magic. So they're actually just trolling, dude. There's no other explanation. The synthesis skills are the only thing I like about this archetype lineage, but other than that, it's ass, and I literally never used it throughout the whole game, essentially. I'm done with this garbage class, let's just move on. The second lowest on this list is none other than the Faker archetype. And while I love my boy Alonzo, he has one of the best bonds in the game to me, I cannot forgive him for this class. I will say right now that Faker is at least more consistent than Gunner, so props on that, but what holds it back is that for one, it only has 2 archetypes a part of his lineage, and for 2, it's kinda just pointless. The only thing it's good for is debuffs, but other than that, it's just unremarkable in every way. And the thing about debuffs in this game is that we got skills that can do damage and debuff, or skills that just debuff way better than one rank at a time. So for me, I'm just scratching my head trying to find a reason to dedicate this archetype to anyone. The only good thing about it really are the synthesis skills that cause 0 MP and do almighty damage. And this is great in a nutshell, but it simply does not feel worth it in actuality. The damage is fairly lackluster, and let's say the damage is good just for argument's sake, because I'm sure it can get up there. The fact it takes 3 press turns to do the advanced one with Trickster, and you need 2 other allies with appropriate lineages. I mean, if this thing was one-shotting the enemies, that would be nice, but in my experience, it just didn't. And managing MP in this game is easy as hell once you know the mage strats and stuff like that anyways. I think this archetype is really interesting and fun, but I don't think it's very strong. It certainly has its niche use cases, so it's not a complete dud, but it's another one that I never found myself using, like, ever. And that's why it's so low on the list. Oh yeah, this next one's gonna cause a lot of discourse. I can already see it now. But hey, at least it's not in the lowest tier, so there's that. I think Masked Dancer is one of the most pointless classes ever. The whole gimmick is that you can use masks to change your skills, weaknesses, and resistances on a whim. But you can't change the masks in battle. You have to change them in the status screen. But you know what else you can change in the status screen? The damn archetypes themselves. So you're spending an accessory slot, which is one of the most precious slots since a lot of the most broken items reside there, to do the exact same thing that just changing to the archetype can do. The innate skills for Masked Dancer aren't even that good either because they don't even do damage. There are skills in this game that both deal great damage and inflict a weakness, so why the hell does the class dedicated to this gimmick not have something like that? The one and only skill I like in this entire lineage of Archetype is the Ruins Flamethrower, which does solid fire damage and removes the buffs off of the enemies it hits. It's basically a Dekaja that does damage, which is great actually. Other than that, the only redeeming quality it has for me is the Synthesis skill to give a party-wide charge effect, which is amazing, and it has my favorite animation in the game because of the fan service for Persona fans, but an Archetype should provide way more than that across the board. I'm sure people will bring up the fact that you don't need to level up the archetypes to use the skills since all you need are the masks, which is kinda fair, but dude, I just never needed to do that at all. With the way this game is and how I view and see it, this is just the most worthless class ever, and that means even the royal version of it at the end of the game is ass too. It's literally the exact same thing with slightly better masks, but it still has the exact same issues as the normal Masked Dancer lineup has. So yeah, just get this shit out of my sight, dude, I'm done. Okay, finally, I can start talking about archetypes I actually enjoy. Number 17 for me is the Thief lineage of Archetype, and this is for one simple fact. The first two tiers of Thief are just not my cup of tea. They sound cool on paper, but then you actually use them and think, man, I could just use any other archetype and do more damage and probably also have better support. So what Thief comes down to is being something you only use to steal items off of enemies. Then you get to the Ninja archetype, however, and then the cogs in your brain start turning. This is Heismay's way of life, right? So it makes sense that this one is based around dodging and just being a complete nuisance for the enemies in general. The main thing I like about Ninja is of course the high amount of agility it gives you, but also the third eye skill, which basically doubles your evasion rate against the enemy. Since dodging takes away 2 press turn icons, you can really fuck the enemies over by doing this. Then on top of the dodging, Ninja gets quick change arts, which nullifies any physical attack for a mere 5 MP. It's like a Tetrakarn but way cheaper, which will also take away press turns from the enemies. It still keeps the dark skills that lower the enemy's hit rate and evasion as well, so all of the aforementioned points on top of that means the enemies just cannot hit you basically, and you drain them of their press turns so the rest of the party can decimate. The only reason this archetype is this low is because it can take a while to get to the Ninja class, whereas some archetypes are just good the whole way through. I love Ninja, but don't love the other two that precede it, which definitely takes my overall enjoyment of the lineage. There are some bosses I straight up would not have beaten without abusing Ninja, so it's still one of my goats for sure. One of the more fun archetypes in my opinion since it's actually really unique. Healer, which comes right after Thief for me, does exactly what I was talking about Thief not doing, which is being consistently good throughout the entire game. I used Healer non-stop because it's just so good support-wise, and it's the only dedicated heal support lineage in the entire game. It might not do anything exceptionally well, and it actually gets beaten in support in the late game, but I can't even count on 2 hands how many times this archetype saved my ass. There's really not anything too important to say about it either, which is the funny thing, because it just supports really well.
Doesn't get much simpler than that.
I think the most standout thing about it is the ability to cure ailments though, because god damn dude, sometimes the enemies spam ailments, and that's how you know they took elements from SMT, because god dude, that shit gets annoying as fuck. That's why Healer is my beloved, even though it's a bit low on the list. Great class, just not exceptional, and that's okay. Actually, I said I was ready to talk about archetypes I like, and I might have lied with number 15, because Mage, oh boy, Mage. There's one major thing that pisses me the hell off about Mage, and that's the fact that you cannot get the final 2 tiers of it until you max Gallica's bond, which is the end of the damn game, dude! Until you get that bond maxed out, you're stuck with a measly medium tier damage for fucking ice, fire, and electricity, and this means it gets power crept damn near instantly. The only thing that Mage has any value for until the end of the game are the passives, which in fairness are pretty good, I can't lie. But bro, is it that much of a sin to ask for some like AoE magic on this class that came sooner than the end of the game? Oh wait, the class doesn't get AoE attacks ever unless you use synthesis skills. Why? Is it a cardinal sin that needs a blood sacrifice to ask for something like that? They clearly have no issue letting Fizz have that treatment, so why not let the main mage class have a crumb? I mean, mage is cool and all for having a lot of coverage, which is why it's not too low on the list, but it's just so annoying how much of it is locked until the end of the game. And even then, it's still not that crazy once you get to the end of the game. The best thing you get from it is Hyper, which doubles your magic damage, which is great, don't get me wrong, but locking it behind Gallica's Bond when you can get charged a decent bit earlier is just a shame. Well, actually it does have a few other solid ones like Magic Boost, which I definitely should not sleep on, but yeah, at the end of the day, my main issue lies with the progression of Mage. If you got those final 2 tiers sooner, it could be way higher, but alas, it was not meant to be. This next one is a bit weird because you could definitely argue it being higher and I wouldn't argue it at all. But for some reason while I was making my tier list, I just couldn't find it in me to put it any higher. The class I'm talking about is Brawler, which is actually one of my favorite classes to use in the entire game. The thing I like about it above all else is that it uses HP instead of MP, which makes the early game dungeons feel a lot less annoying, and the skills it has are very useful in the early game as well. Brawler is actually one of the first archetypes you even get access to, so chances are you're probably going to have to use it at one point or another, and I actually use it on my Protag for most of the game. But I don't know, I was just sitting there making my tier list and I was like, I don't know, maybe it's just not that high for me. I think part of it is that you can't get the 3rd tier until maxing out Katharina, who isn't available until the final major city of the game, so it gets power crept quite quickly. Brawler does have some absolutely goated passes though. It's got Strike Boost, Spirit of Adversity, Dodge Master, and more. So yeah, I only have good things to say about it for the most part. We're getting to the point where most of the archetypes are quite good, just that some are better than others, which is how it should be. The final archetype of the B tier is none other than Knight. I was planning on making Knight be way lower on the list, but then I was looking back at the skills and I was like, nah, it's actually not as bad as I thought it was. It's easily one of the best archetypes for the early game, especially the Cathedral dungeon, and then it picks back up once you get Paladin. The taunt is only good for enemies that use single target skills, which is rare after the early game, but it has other skills to make up for it. Paladin has the cheap protector card called Protect Guard, which can be put onto any party member, and it also has Knight's defense to raise defense by 3 ranks, so the taunt is even better in the cases where it is viable. It also has pretty damn good synthesis skill lineups too, and the Dark Knight archetype of Knight can be fairly solid for pierce damage. It has great coverage overall, doesn't take too long to get, and has pretty good support capabilities. So again, if you want to argue this to be higher, then by all means feel free, cause I get it. It's just for me personally, it's not too suited to my playstyle, so it's a bit lower for my personal list, y'all know how it is. Okay, we finally make it to the A tier, and this is when things get real interesting. The very first archetype of Metaphor Refantazio comes gliding into 12th place. It is none other than the wind-wielding Seeker lineage. This might seem a bit weird because some of the things I've been complaining about, such as not having AoE magic, is prevalent in this class for most of the game. But to me, Seeker is an exception for one reason. You get access to the medium and heavy tier skills super early with the Seeker class. Even though it doesn't get AoE skills until the Soul Hacker tier, it kinda just doesn't matter for Seeker because you get the 2nd tier pretty quickly, it has Vitalogy for some of the best early game buffs, and some really good synthesis skills for early game to get you by. Seeker is kinda like your Swiss Army knife of archetypes, where it's consistently solid the entire game, and then Soul Hacker has some good ass skills. Not only does it fix the issue of not having AoE skills, but it goes a step beyond even that. Soul Hacker has AoE wind skills that can debuff, restore MP on hit, and ignore resistances. If that wasn't enough, for my homies who love fizz builds like me, you can support with Adventurer's Curiosity, which raises the crit rate of all allies for 3 turns. Then it has Heat Riser, healing skills, and AoE fire skills that also restore MP on hit. This class is just extremely good overall. It can do whatever the hell you want without even inheriting skills, especially with the synthesis skills in mind too. I mean, just look at how many fucking synthesis skills there are. The only time Seeker kinda falls off is in the later half of the mid game, but that's such a short time span that it doesn't really matter too much. Goated lineage overall, and it's one of the most fun magic classes easily in my opinion. Alright, we're very quickly closing into the top 10 spot, and the gatekeeper of the top 10 is the Summoner. I'm not gonna lie to y'all, I was seriously wondering where to put this archetype because it's easily the best magic one in my opinion, but I put it just below the top 10 because you don't get it until well into the mid game and it takes time to properly set up. The summoner lineage uses special items that you need to obtain through special experiments in the academia, and to have it properly built, you want most of, if not all of them at your disposal. Even though you do get summoner at the mid game, it'll probably be near late game when you get everything popping the way you want it to be. But that is the one and only con this archetype has, cause god damn bro, it is good. It basically has access to every single type of magic, it has skills to remove buffs, skills to debuff, healing skills, and some cheeky physical skills in case you need it for coverage or something like that. There's basically no instance where Summoner isn't valuable to have on the team, and it only gets better with Devil Summoner where it gets some skills to ignore resistances. Combine that with the plus 14 strength and magic and you're just cooking bro, it's low-key OP in a way in how much coverage it has. We now break into the top 10, where shit starts getting really real. Kicking off the top 10 is the Merchant class, and let me tell y'all, this class was the biggest shock in the entire game to me. When I was reading off what it could do, I was like, okay, that's cool, but you probably won't be able to use it until the late game since it uses money, right? No, that was just completely wrong. This class is easily making all of its money back it spends and then some. You essentially have infinite resource management with this class. It's all because of one skill that doesn't seem like much when it first meets your eye, and that's Gold Attack. For 500 Reeve, you can do an attack that does weak almighty damage to one enemy with a high crit rate, and I really didn't think it was too good at first, but I kept using it and realized I was just dead wrong. This skill, no joke, carried me throughout the fucking whole game basically. In the early game, it's good enough to damn near one-shot everything, and throughout the rest of the game, it helps you make the press turn system your bitch with the crits. Then you get to the end game and obtain Tycoon. And bro, Tycoon is so funny, because why in the hell are these insane skills on the Merchant lineage? So we got Gold Rush, which is a better version of Gold Attack, Critical Trade to double crit rate, and Almighty Boost to increase almighty damage by 20%, and then it gets a crazy ass Synthesis too in the Money Power and Golden Soldier skills. Money Power gives Heat Riser to an ally by 3 ranks, and Golden Soldier does extreme fizz damage to all enemies. By the time you get this archetype, money is no longer an issue either, so it's basically free. It's actually absurd, and it makes me wonder what the hell they were thinking with Merchant. It pays for itself, it has some of the best skills in the game. I don't think I even need to say anymore, it's a good class throughout the entire game, and that's going to be a common theme for the next few archetypes to come down the line. This next archetype, I cannot believe I couldn't put it higher on my list, but it's the Warrior archetype. There is no point in this entire game where Warrior falls off. The one and only con this lineage has is that it can be very MP hungry, but as long as you're using it in the proper moments, you can just nuke all the enemies anyways, it doesn't really matter. As far as Fizz goes in this game, Warrior is nearly a must run, and it has some of my favorite skills in the game as well. It gets Slash Boost, which is self-explanatory, Flash Dodge, which can be great for taking the enemy's press turns, Regen 3 to heal up every turn, and Sturdy Stance to half the damage you take. This class just does insane damage, has some great self-buffing skills, great tanking, and is the second archetype you ever get access to. The fact you get it instantly more or less, and the fact that it's always good throughout the whole game makes it extremely valuable. This is yet another one I was considering putting higher on the list simply because of how consistent it is, but the final archetype of A tier is just way too broken, bro. It makes even this class pale in comparison. While you don't get this archetype until pretty late into the game, the Berserker class does such an absurd amount of damage that I have to put it above Warrior. The instant I got access to this lineage, I was like, oh, okay, so I just win the entire game now, cool. This is essentially Brawler on steroids. It innately gets great strike skills, charge to double fizz damage, and Warcry to debuff the attack and defense of the enemies, and at that point it's like, okay, it could probably solo the entire game from this point on, but that's not even the end of it. I think Berserker has probably the best synthesis skill lineup in the game. It's got ones to ignore resistances, debuff, apply weakness, and it has all 3 types of physical skills. Really, you can't ask for much more from a physical class, but just in case you're greedy, it gives the highest shrink stat buff out of any of the archetypes. Not much more to say, this archetype is broken, but oh wait, yes there is more to say because that's only the first tier. The Destroyer archetype gets some extra magic skills, and yeah, the magic damage sucks, that's no mystery, but it's used for utility. Again, you can remove buffs, debuff, and ignore resistances, and this time you don't need to spend 2 turns for a synthesis. On top of that, it can be nice for coverage since you can make use of the press turns with every type of fizz attack, wind, electricity, bless, and the new almighty synthesis it gets at this tier. It could easily be higher, but the S tier is just way too broken, and it's time we finally get into it. This point in the video is going to be showing and going over late game content, and as a result it's going to have some spoilers that I cannot avoid showing. If you do not want to be spoiled on some in-game stuff, then I'd recommend clicking off now and coming back once you either beat the game or see what you want to see for yourself. You have been warned. Starting off the S tier is the Royal Knight class, which is an archetype exclusive to Hulkenburg and only becomes available in the endgame. And with how broken the Royal archetypes are, it makes sense that they're like that. So Royal Knight can do some of the best pierce damage in the game, it has the best tanking in the game, a base 15% chance to repel any non-almighty damage which just annihilates their press turns if it procs, it can apply a barrier to anything except almighty to an ally, it heals ailments in 1 turn, and when you do the taunt skill, you get a free press turn the following turn. That taunt above all else is why I put this archetype so high, because even if the enemies do AoE skills, you still get the free press turn no matter what. I'm not the biggest fan of the synthesis skills, since they either take 3 damn turns or just cost a fuck ton, but with what it already has, I'm not stressing it too much. If you do use the synthesis skill to repel all attacks except almighty to all allies though, you're basically immortal and honestly you probably just win right then and there unless it's a long fight. I used to sleep on this class, but the more I thought about it, the more I enjoyed the way it was designed. Another class I was sleeping on among getting it is Heismay's Royal Thief. But again, I thought about the biggest pro it had and was like, yeah, that's way too good not to put in S tier. I hardly care about anything else this archetype does besides its dodging. That alone carries it for me. So it gets the skills that half the hit rate of attacks directed toward him, he has the highest agility stat, and if he dodges a single attack, it removes all of the enemy's press turns, not just the normal 2. His other attacks are alright, like it has the cheaper Tetrakarn ability, but dude, that dodging shit is way too broken. I think it's honestly one of the most broken abilities in the game because some of those fucking enemies can get like 8 press turns in the late game. It's absolutely absurd, and Heismay is just able to say, nah, I don't really feel like dealing with that. Let's just get rid of those for free. It's one of the most fun classes to use just for that reason alone, and for that reason, I don't have much more I want to say. We now break into the top 5 of this tier list, so surely there's only Royal archetypes left, right? Nah. ATLUS decided to make what is in my opinion one of the most broken archetypes in the game a normal one that anyone can equip, and that is the Commander lineage. The Commander can basically do whatever the hell you want. It has some of the best buffs in the game by far, it gets fire, ice, wind, and almighty skills, it has some of the craziest passives, and it has one of the best synthesis skills in the game. Maybe even the best. The Dynast formation synthesis you get on the Warlord class gives a party-wide Heat Riser effect, and it raises all the stats by 3 ranks. So once you do this, you probably won the fight. It might be MP hungry, but if you pop this during a boss fight, dude, it's probably just over. Like, I don't even know what to say. Just to top it all off, you get synthesis skills to debuff as well. I really don't know what they were thinking with this because it is so broken throughout the whole game. And it's so funny that a normal tier archetype made it into the top 5. For those who like to use magic, it has a skill to inflict weakness to ice as well, so just a cherry on top of whatever else you want to use. The reason I like the way Commander does this over Masked Dancer for those who are curious is that it doesn't take an accessory slot and the skill itself deals damage, so it fits the way I like to play a lot better. And that synthesis skill, man, Jesus. Top 4 is when we start getting into break the game territory, and number 4 is going to be Eupha's Royal Summoner archetype. This is by far and away the best magic archetype in the entire game. which is weird considering Junah has a higher magic stat, but I digress. This archetype is the summoner class, but on steroids. All the skills and whatnot it gets access to are just better. Like, the healing skill Summoner had is now upgraded to a party-wide heal and revive, and everything else just does more damage. So for that reason, there isn't even much more to talk about. It's Summoner but on super mega steroids. If Royal Summoner seemed broken, then boy, you ain't seen nothing yet. His top 3 is when we really start getting into break the game territory, and number 3 is going to be Strohl's Royal Warrior. I cannot believe this is not even higher, but it goes to show how insane the rest of the archetypes above it really are. Royal Warrior has Vorpal Blade, which deals extreme slash damage to all enemies and lowers their attack, skills to raise attack and hit rate and evasion by 3 ranks, Brave Blade for a good slash attack with high crit rate, Hasatobi, and the passive where if you kill an enemy with a Fizz attack, it doesn't take press turns. I don't know if I even need to say anything else, but just in case that's not enough, it retains the broken ass synthesis skills from the standard warrior lineup. So you just win once you get this shit. Insane damage, insane debuffs, insane passives, nuff said. The final 2 archetypes left to go over are so unbelievably broken that I've given them their own GOAT tier. It does not get any better than this. Royal Berserker, y'all. Holy fucking shit, my jaw dropped to the floor when I saw this archetype for the first time. You remember that synthesis skill I was talking about that inflicted a weakness to strike on Berserker? Yeah, it's just a normal skill now. And then it also gets an ignore resistance skill too. What? It also gets Strike Surge to boost strike damage by 30%, then Health Vessel to boost HP amount by 30%, and it retains Charge. By the time you get to the end of the game and get this for Basilio, he's probably going to be pushing 900 plus HP while doing damn near the best damage in the game. It almost beats the Protag in some cases, but even if it doesn't, it makes the press turn system your bitch and nukes every enemy with no struggle at all. Wonton Destruction being a normal skill is so broken, God bless you, Atlas. We have now reached the end. The pinnacle of Metaphor Refantazio, and if you've played the game, you definitely know what's coming. The Prince archetype of the Protagonist is by far the best in the game, and this should not come as a surprise. The Protag's always got that broken ass shit. The Prince gets Heroes Proving to self-heat rise by 3 ranks, Heroes Cry to get 4 extra press turns once in battle, Royal Slash to deal extreme Fizz Almighty damage to an enemy and does more damage to human types, and it just resists every affinity. Okay, if that wasn't enough, how about this? All of your allies can do any synthesis skill with the Prince. They no longer need a specific archetype to do it alongside them. They can just always do it with the Prince. This means you can do whatever fucking party comp you want, and if you get all of the royal archetypes, then you can get the Armageddon synthesis. Pretty good if you ask me personally. Prince tanks basically the best, does the most damage, and technically supports the best. It's easily the pinnacle of the game and nothing is topping it. We have now covered all 21 lineages of archetypes in this game, which means we've finally reached the end. Oh my god, thank god, I've been talking for like fucking 3 hours. Metaphor's gameplay loop with the archetypes is very fun to experiment with to find out what works best for you. And of course, this is all based off of my personal experience with the game. With that in mind, what would your personal tier list of the archetypes be? I'm sure you all have a lot of opinions of your own, and I'd love to hear it. I'd also love to hear what you think about my tier list. Do you think it's good, bad, perfect, ass? Definitely drop some feedback. I'd love to hear what you all think, and if you enjoyed it, please feel free to drop a like and a subscribe. It helps the channel out a lot, and you can even have a free cookie on your way out. Here you go, homie. It's been your boy Yandere Gogeta, and I will see you in the next video. Peace out, everybody, and have a great day.